So we're on to our next panel discussion. So we have environmental priorities under the Biden-Harris administration. And I'm going to introduce Jane Nishida. Jane is the Assistant Administrator for EPA's Office of International and Tribal Affairs. She served as EPA's acting administrator from January 20th, 2021 to March 11th, 2021, before the confirmation of current EPA Administrator Michael Reagan. She also served as the Director of Office of Regional and Bilateral Affairs within OITA. In her current capacity, she leads EPA's international and tribal portfolios and is responsible for the full range of EPA's environmental policy and development and program implementation in tribal lands and in sovereign nations outside of the United States. Nishida represents EPA within the United States government and works closely with the tribal governments, foreign governments, international organizations, and other key stakeholders on matters relating to the environment. So we'll welcome Jane. Thank you.
Thank you for your introduction, Lenny, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, and all the members of the Region 10 Tribal Leaders Summit. It is my honor and pleasure to be joining you today. So thank you for the invitation so that I think in a moment you'll hear from my colleague and good friend, Joanne Chase, who's the director of the American Indian Environmental Office. But before I turn it over to Joanne, I have been asked to update you on some of President Biden priorities, particularly as it relates to our tribal partners. And so I would like to begin that by saying that from day one, the Biden-Harris administration has been committed to respecting tribal sovereignty, honoring our federal trust responsibilities, and strengthening our nation-to-nation relationship. On January 26th of last year, President Biden issued a memorandum on tribal consultation that promotes regular, robust, and meaningful consultation with tribal nations. In response to the president's memorandum, EPA's Office for International and Tribal Affairs, and more specifically, the American Indian Environmental Office, has worked to identify specific priorities for EPA's tribal program. Joanne will walk you through in a few minutes those priorities. But what I would like to do is to highlight some of the work that the Biden administration is doing under the White House Council for Native American Affairs. This was a council that was established under the Obama administration and has now been reestablished by the Biden administration, but has made the activities of the White House even stronger. And EPA is proud to be co-leading two of the committees under the White House Council. One is the Climate Change, Tribal Homelands and Treaties Committee, which Joanne serves as our representative, and that is in conjunction with the Department of Interior. And then the second committee, and this is a new committee that the Biden administration has created under the White House Council, is the International and Indigenous Issues Committee, which I represent EPA along with my colleagues from the Department of Interior. As a part of the work that we are doing, two important things that I wanted to highlight. Under the Climate Change and Tribal Homelands and Treaties Committee, there have been two important deliverables. One is the Tribal Treaty Rights MOU that President Biden announced at the White House Tribal Leaders Summit last year, in which there were 17 agencies that signed on to an MOU to respect, obviously, our obligations when it comes to tribal treaty rights. Again, Joanne will go into a little more detail. And the second key deliverable under that committee was looking at the climate change adaptation plans and making a commitment to work again with tribal nations and tribal communities to address the concerns with regards to climate adaptation and resilience. Under the International Indigenous Issues Committee, there are a number of transboundary issues that we are considering under the White House Council of this committee. And I know that many of the tribal nations and tribal communities on the call today have boundaries with, particularly with our Canadian neighbors. And so this committee, I think, is very important in terms of addressing some of those transboundary issues that affect your lands and your tribal treaty rights. So one of the first things that we did was to look at the issue with the Kootenai watershed. We, in concert with our colleagues at the Department of State, visited actually the region last September, where we again met with some of the leaders from the Kootenai tribe of Idaho, as well the Kootenai and the other tribal nations, to address the transboundary pollution that is coming from large-scale mining in British Columbia. We know that this is an area that affects, again, the water quality in terms of the Kootenai watershed, particularly with regards to selenium and other pollutants. So working with our colleagues in the State Department, we are now developing a referral to the International Joint Commission. This is something that I know that the tribal nations in the region have urged us to do. And we are now proceeding with our State Department colleagues to make that referral to the IJC. Additionally, another issue that a transboundary issue that we are working on has to do with the Arctic. There is another committee that has been established separate from the White House Council for Native American Affairs, and that's the Arctic Executive Steering Committee, or AESC. And we are, again, working closely with our colleagues in Region 10 and the Alaska Operations Office and other agencies to address two important issues affecting Alaska Native villages in the Arctic region. One is the issue with regards to water and sanitation. So we have an initiative under the Arctic Executive Steering Committee to address the concerns with a lack of water, sufficient water infrastructure in the Arctic area. The second area that we are working on in the Arctic is the issue of contaminated lands. For those of you, obviously, in Alaska, you are very well familiar with the ANCSA Settlement Act and the issue that the federal government has committed to, and that's to address contaminated lands under ANCSA. And so there's an initiative, again, under the Arctic Executive Steering Committee. So through these efforts, we are, again, working closely with our colleagues in the other agencies, as well as our colleagues in the region. Another important priority of the Biden-Harris administration is, of course, the successful passage of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or bill. EPA, as a result of the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, will be investing more than $60 billion in the health and equity and resilience of American communities, including, obviously, the resilience and equity for tribal nations and communities in Alaska. So some of the highlights with regards to EPA's investments in bill, or the bipartisan infrastructure, is $50 billion to improve drinking water, wastewater, and stormwater infrastructure, $5 billion to address longstanding pollution and to support solid waste infrastructure, $5 billion for decarbonizing the nation's school bus fleet, and $100 million for pollution prevention, or P2 grants, which is largely, it is a new program where we're targeting environmental justice concerns. In addition, we are working through the infrastructure task force that includes not only EPA, but our colleagues in the Department of Interior, IHS, USDA, to address, again, the issues with regards to leveraging the resources, not only of EPA, but the other federal agencies to address the infrastructure needs in tribal nations and tribal communities. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Joanne Chase to go over specifically the priorities within AIEO.